Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. I actually have 10 o'clock on my phone here, and we have a ton of information to share with you. So we're going to get started, and I know that people are still rolling in, which is great. But welcome. We're providing a community briefing today, a quick update on the UW Sustainability Action Plan. Next slide, please. Actually, next two slides. And welcome to those who are rolling in. So thank you for joining us. I'm Lisa DeLude. I'm the UW Director of Sustainability. And as you can see, our UW Sustainability team is on here on the screen, and we are facilitating the development of a new sustainability action plan for the university across the tri-campus. With me today is Ante Vulen with GluMac, and we have a fantastic team from GluMac. Not everyone is here today, but they have been helping us shepherd and facilitate the development of this new plan, as well as Site Story, our other consultant who is helping with engagement and community outreach. Next slide, please. So we also want to know who's here. So if you could put your name and what department or unit you're affiliated with, whether that's UW or if you're from someone outside UW, please put that in the chat. It would just be great to get sort of a understanding of who has joined us. And you can keep doing that throughout as people come into the waiting room and enter the webinar today. Just feel free to continue doing that. Okay. So I want to run through the agenda. Oh, can you go back one? Thanks, Ante. Go through today's intention. Lauren is going to provide a 2050 visioning recap, which was the start of our process, strategic planning process. We're also going to give a quick overview of the Sustainability Action Plan, or SAP, working groups, just shine the light on a few things that we want to highlight for you. And the bulk of the webinar today is really going to be sharing out of our draft and emerging goals that we've worked with the community on developing. And then we're going to spend just a few minutes on what's next and how you can stay engaged throughout the rest of the strategic planning process. Okay, next slide, please. So today's intention. So this is really meant to be a sharing out of where we're at so far, so that we're keeping you all, our community, who's really the center and the focus of this plan, up to speed on where we're at. We're gonna, as I mentioned, Lauren's gonna walk through some of the Ante is gonna walk through some of the emerging vision statements and draft actions. That's really gonna be the bulk of what we're sharing today. But we want you to be able to provide your inputs. So on the current draft and everything that we're sharing. So you'll see in that upper right-hand corner that we have a community input form. And I think Lauren is going to pop that into the chat. So that's going to be the primary way, or the primary form that you can give us feedback. It's a web-based form. We'll also have all of the draft vision statements, actions on the web, so that you can go and review those and provide input as time allows. But you're always welcome to put, if you have questions, concerns, please pop them into the chat today, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go. The last thing I just wanted to highlight before we get into the bulk of the presentation today is just, acknowledging the elephant in the room, that we're in really difficult and uncertain times with state budget cuts, with federal budget cuts. So with that sort of out there, we've really been keeping this as a central focus in plan development. We really want to make sure that whatever goes into this plan are things that we can accomplish, knowing that bandwidth, resources, both people resources and funding, is likely going to be tougher than we've seen really in quite a while. So just want to share that and highlight, make sure that we're highlighting that with everybody this morning. Okay, next slide, please. And for those of you that are rolling in, if you could just put your name in the chat and your affiliation, that would be great. And I'm going to hand it off to Lauren.
Thanks, Lisa. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining. I know we're getting lots of folks rolling in. We had over 100 people registered, so really excited to see you all here. But next, in this next section, I want to share a little bit about how we began the process. Sorry, Ontavia, go back, thanks. Kind of by imagining what a sustainable future looks like for UW 25 years from now in 2050. So before we dove into writing specific visions and actions, we started with a big picture question, which was what does a sustainable and equitable future at UW look like in 2050? This long-term visioning process helped us define a shared North Star, as we like to call it, a clear direction that reflects our community's values and priorities. So by anchoring ourselves in that 2050 vision, we're able to work backward and make sure our near-term goals are aligned and focused and moving towards something really meaningful. So to do this, we wanted to make sure that this vision wasn't created in a vacuum. We heard from over 400 people over the past 6 months across the UW community, students, staff, faculty, and community partners from all three campuses, as well as UW Medicine. So we held dedicated sessions with the Sustainability Action Plan Executive Committee, which is a group of students, staff, faculty who are really dedicated and kind of advising where this plan goes and how we engage with our broader community. We also held UW-wide kickoff events, both online and in person across our tri-campus. We engaged with students in the Huskies for Equitable Sustainability group, and we held dedicated workshops at UW Tacoma, UW Bothell, and an online virtual kickoff with UW Medicine, and trying to meet folks where they're at. On campus as well through tabling pop-ups. So we held tabling events at all three campuses, and at those tabling events, we had a few ways to engage. So one was something called Message to the Future, where we had these postcards called Letters to the Future for student, staff, and anyone else coming to our tables to answer the question, what does a sustainable and just UW look like in 2050? So kind of a fun snapshot or time capsule of what folks care about most right now. And we're going to showcase those postcards online and in person in the near future. So very excited to share more about that. And then another feature at these tabling events were giving the opportunity for folks coming to our table to kind of vote with their values. So we had boards up with our draft actions, and folks were able to place stickers and kind of vote with on those goals and actions that felt most important to them. So what resonated with them. So this early input really set the tone for the rest of the planning process and really helped shape the draft vision statements and actions that you'll see later in the presentation today. Next slide, please. So as we engage students, staff, and faculty across all campuses, a few themes came up again and again. And so I want to share a bit about what we heard with you all today through this visioning process. These four ideas or themes, integration, equity, leadership, and community, were really reflective of what we see as the core priorities of our UW community. So I'll walk through each of them and share a little bit more. So the integration and visibility of sustainability, theme one. So a major takeaway from the feedback we heard was the call to make sustainability more visible, more present in the day-to-day experiences of students, faculty, and staff. So quotes on screen here, we heard, we need to help students move beyond thinking of sustainability as recycling and solar panels. Sustainability embedded in academics, budgeting, procurement, and hiring, every process. Theme two, justice, equity, and inclusion. Another really strong theme we heard was the need to embed equity throughout the entire plan, not just in one section, but across all of the topic areas. Folks emphasize things like affordability, accessibility, cultural relevance, and representation in decision making, especially from our first generation BIPOC and frontline communities. So, not just centering students who already know about sustainability, but how do we reach the rest of our community here and beyond in our state, region, and nation. And then community-based knowledge, especially from Indigenous and frontline communities, must lead. Those were really impressive quotes that we heard. Theme 3, leadership and accountability. We heard a clear call for UW to lead, not just through, bold vision statements, but through action and transparency. So folks asked for, concrete actions, things like net zero timelines, fossil fuel divestment, and taking real and tracking real progress over time. So some quotes we heard was a closed loop campus powered by renewable energy. A big idea, creating internal policies that have teeth, not just goals, but also understanding the consequences of inaction. Finally, engagement and community participation. We heard that the way we build this plan and how we implement it really matters just as much as what's in it. So we heard that in order for UW to develop a stronger and more reciprocal partnerships, or a more stronger and a stronger plan, we need reciprocal partnerships with local communities, tribes, and underrepresented students, faculty, and staff. So, some quotes I hear on screen, we have to be intentional. It's about relationships, not just outputs. UW should be a place to experiment, test, and learn from real sustainability projects. So these themes, integration, equity, leadership, and participation, came through clearly in our visioning process, and they've directly shaped the draft actions and visions that you'll see today, and we're really excited to share with you. Um, all right. Next slide, please. I think I'm going to hand it off to you, Ante, to dive deeper into what those actions and visions are.
Yes, thanks so much. As Lauren said, we have been hearing a lot, and we continue to hear. The intent of this meeting is not just for us to be not only informing you, but also to provoke more feedback, more commentary, and more engagement. Because as when you look at our plan development timeline, we're relatively early, and that community engagement input is supposed to continue throughout the process. So we've been working in meeting with key stakeholders and interested parties in some structured workshops. We're going to begin another round shortly. We're working to then take everything we're hearing and turn it into goals and actions, and then look at some of the impacts, benefits, costs of those actions, and turn that into a plan that can really guide UW action. And then that does not end the planning process. There's more opportunities for feedback, revision, and refinement. And then finally, with the goal of launching early in 2026, this new UW sustainability plan. I want to talk a little bit more about the workshops that we've been conducting in. So hopefully some of you have been able to engage in them or will be in the future. We have structured these loosely around 8 categories or focus areas: academics, research, innovation, the core mission of the university; buildings, energy, and climate, the built environment of the university across its tri-campuses and health system, and how that affects sustainability outcomes; commuting and transportation, the impact beyond the campus for all of its community members; procurement and finance, how the university spends its money and makes influences beyond its supply chain; food systems, something that engages all of us; landscapes and ecological systems, thinking of how the footprint at each campus reflects its local ecology and how that will evolve in a changing climate; materials and waste, what happens to the things that the university is procuring and then sending away, and what are the opportunities to improve those outcomes; and then around community building and engagement, how do we tie this all together to create, as Lauren outlined, a really holistic sense of sustainability that keeps stakeholders involved across all their University of Washington journeys. And we're gearing up now for this second round. The first round was about listening, really just trying to get feedback, around that vision, around what the university should be doing. We've synthesized a lot of that. We'll be showing some of that today, and you'll get the opportunity to respond to it through that engagement input form that's being shared in the chat. That's been synthesized. These are specific things the university, could prioritize in the next 5 years. And then through there, we'll just continue to adjust it based on community feedback, and then have opportunities for final review from the community. So this is an iterative process. We are not here to show you the finished product today. And I think just to visually drive that home is we're in the midst of what we call prototyping. These are two of my favorite prototypes, for the first Apple personal computer and for the first Super Soaker. So what we see in prototypes is that we start to understand the components. We start to understand how the intended user is going to use the squirt gun or the computer, but it's not fully baked. So what we're seeing today is not the final plan, and it's moving though in the direction of trying to create something that works for the university through everything, that reflects the vision that Lisa and Lauren discussed. So we produced a prototype early on that kind of was focused around information structures and just how people would use the plan, thinking of different users across the community. And what we wanted to make it clear through this whole process are a few things. First, that the university acknowledged it has a big footprint in a bunch of areas, and that also has a community that cares about all of these areas. We also want to make it clear that this is intended to be an integrated plan. We want to be able to speak to the diverse operations of the university to ensure that best practices are being shared and that everyone can feel connected to this sustainability mission. To integrate that, as discussed, a 2050 vision statement is what integrates this all to what is a sustainable and just University of Washington. That vision then can be targeted to a goal. What goal are we pursuing? What are the supporting goals? And then what are the clear actions that we can go to our community and say, this is what we will be doing or what we need you to do going forward. So this is, if you were around for the previous plan, I would say it's a more integrated approach of tying this together and making it actionable. In that first prototype, we were really trying to talk about how people are going to experience the plan. We want something that is legible, as jargon-free as possible, but still connected to the science and analysis that guides what needs to be done. So this is a example cover page. We want to highlight storytelling and the people in the University of Washington community clearly here, because those are the people who every day are moving these goals forward, and they're also the people who the university is pursuing these goals on behalf of. We've been iterating through this. I think we got a lot of feedback. We'll dive in more detail shortly, but really looking at what are the targets? How will the university know what it's trying to, if it's gotten where it's trying to go by 2050? We're trying to use, in the interest of making this very direct, as much active voice as possible, and then diving into not that where possible, we identify the specific groups or positions within the university that are going to achieve things. We've revised some of those 2030 flagship actions, the things that the university will prioritize in an area by 2030 based on listening sessions. And as we've refocused around that next 5 years of action, we are trying to make sure that we stay on that through line to where the university wants to go by 2050. And for some goals, there are interim targets. So for example, we know from climate science that emissions cannot just go business as usual till 2050 and then drop off. There's a drawdown over time. And so for metrics in that area and other metrics, we're looking for where we can find those interim targets to maintain accountability to the community. So how this looks today, we have a series of 5 major 2050 targets. Carbon neutrality driven by climate science by 2050. Increasing climate resilience. Finding a way across the health system, across all the campuses to have a functioning university that keeps people safe, healthy, and productive, even in a changing climate. Part of the other large target is to become zero waste. There's some industry definitions of zero waste we can talk about later. Usually it's associated with a 90% diversion of waste from landfill, but we also want to see an overall reduction in waste, an increase in reuse in that timeline. And then a big target that is broad right now, and so this is one area we're really looking to build out, is that community engagement. How do we make everyone at University of Washington aware of what the university is doing in these areas and give them opportunities to get connected, and I think build in that sense of connection to responsible stewardship that many of us feel here in the Pacific Northwest, and especially in the Puget Sound area. And then building from that is that target 5, to support regenerative ecosystems. The university has these incredible campuses in very special places. And how can we be stewards of that in a way that's not just, as they say, less bad, but more good and actively enhancing. All of these things then kind of tie down, and they have a vision of what is going to be achieved in the focus areas that then support these targets. There's a flagship action. This is where the university will prioritize attention in the next 5 years. And then there's some supporting actions. How do we make sure that we can get there? How do we address other targets that need to be done? And the goal is that all of these actions should be implementable, achievable, and also tied to that long-term suggestion. Sure. So I'm going to go next into reviewing how this is looking for within these 8 focus areas. There is a lot of content on these slides. You will have an opportunity through a web format to see these things. They are fit to fit on one slide. I'm just warning you, the text a little small, but I'm going to talk through what is on there and also what we've seen of how it's evolved since we started this process a few months ago. So buildings, energy, and climate is a major component of the university's footprint. I think it's something that we all interact with buildings almost on a daily basis. And then we see as well, some of us, those behind the scenes emissions, all this, what we are called direct emissions from combustion of fossil fuels, that makes up a sizable portion of the university's footprint. Our goal, how this has iterated since our initial pass, was to make the language to be a little clearer, a little less jargony, and then to really focus on goals that feel concrete and achievable while still being meaningful from a client science perspective. What climate science tells us is that we are on that path of drawing down emissions by 2050, and we don't want to pick and choose the emissions. And so we are addressing what are called scope 1, 2, and 3. So emissions that are direct emissions, indirect emissions, or under scope 2, which are often associated with electricity, and then under scope 3, indirect emissions that are from the value chain, of the things the university buys or just are otherwise not part of those, where you don't have direct control over. And so within all these areas, we know that an interim target for emissions that is key is the on-campus elimination of direct emissions. So that's a 2040 target. So that's, if you're envisioning it as a University of Washington where all vehicles are electrified and running on clean power, and all fossil fuels have been phased out across the tri-campuses. That's a great point, Dan. Climate science does tell us exactly how bad the problem is. Sustainability science tells us what we need to do to continue to survive. So within here, there are some priority actions. To implement decarbonization, we do have to drive projects like heat recovery and thermal storage that will lower the future cost impact of full electrification. And building out renewables where appropriate at campus is an important part of that. Labs are another major area where there's a big footprint, but also a perceived great sense of opportunity in that area. So there's a focus on actionable steps around improving the Green Labs program. Water is another key part of the university's footprint, both in terms of consumption of potable water and then what happens to that water as it gets used by the university community. And so that is a focus in 2030 to take some actionable steps so we know what the data will tell us to work to reduce. And then within this all, we have the greenest building is an existing building. So there's a focus on how do we take our existing buildings and move them up to a better level of performance with modern cooling for a changing climate and with high quality air filtration. These actions take the university's building stock and move them towards that 2050 vision of a carbon neutral phase, while focusing on the immediate opportunities. Academics, research, and innovation is the core mission of the university. And it's something where we heard loud and clearly that people want to see some kind of a unified strategy. At the same time, what we also heard is that anything university-wide may not necessarily speak to the needs of specific departments, researchers, or students. And so the goal now is to understand how we can embed sustainability in an appropriate and effective way, while also generating data and using the university as a laboratory to both prepare students and researchers and faculty for a climate challenge world. So that flagship action in here is to have a sustainability academic development action plan. And that is really focused on what can be achieved through on-campus project work. And when we say on-campus, we mean tri-campus. And part of that is just talking to more people. I think this is an area where interdisciplinary collaboration and existing programs need to be taken advantage of. The goal is not to necessarily replace what's working, but amplify and build around. And then to try to establish the key metrics that actually align with student success. The goal would be long-term that UW has a sustainability hub that can house these things. It could be an adapted program or a new program. And then within that, develop on-campus sustainability projects that help students engage with this and build the skills that are part of their academic or professional career. Ultimately, this is driving that target 4, where the community is engaged in sustainability moving forward. So materials and waste management, this is something that virtually everyone engages with. I think waste is one of the most visible aspects of sustainability to most users of any building or any community. UW at Seattle has good data about their diversion rate. That's not as consistently built out across the campuses. And so there's a flagship action. Some of these actions are supporting just getting better data. But was identified as a flagship action was really lowering contamination. Contamination is when the wrong material is in the wrong bin, and what that leads to is it really burdens the recycling process. So that flagship action goal is to improve the quality of the waste streams, which is the most actionable way to improve the recycling rate. So within there, when you improve the recycling rate, that amount goes away from waste. The amount when you improve the diversion rate, that's decreasing the amount of waste that goes to landfill and hopefully increases the amount of material that's going back to a useful second life. Within those better waste streams, the goal is to get better data about what is driving those waste streams, and then begin to establish targeted plans around certain materials or waste streams. For example, disposable plastics, bottles, things like utensils, things like that. There's a great perception that there are better and better opportunities to move away from those, but we want to be, cautious, but progressing continually towards making that goal. Long term, there is this goal to get to a quote unquote net zero for waste, 90% diversion, and then using some of the special parts of the university, a football stadium, or major UW sponsored events can kind of lead the way on that through supporting infrastructure, supporting policy. Another key part of the university's footprint is procurement. In the recent greenhouse gas inventory, the university looked seriously at the carbon impact of the goods and services procured by the university. It's pretty substantial. And at the same time, there's increasing awareness in the community that the supply chain drives major impact, not just from a carbon perspective, as well as from overall resource management, and also through a equity and justice impact, both in Seattle, Washington, and globally. So the vision is to use procurement, use one of the university's biggest levers to begin to mitigate those negative impacts and transition to something more regenerative and just. We also acknowledge that procurement is challenging. The university first buys a lot of things that are needed across both the academic and the health system operations, and buying specialty research equipment, all these things that are with different supply chains and different availability of information. But what UW also has is a very motivated and effective procurement staff. And we see working with procurement staff to roll out training and processes that can focus on the measurable improvements that are available. The goal then by 2030 is that when we talk about sustainability that's baked in, we start to see that through some of these supporting actions that meet that same goal. There's a huge opportunity to leverage what's going on with our suppliers to work with them to mitigate impacts. Many of them have their own sustainability goals and their own data that we can leverage to show that the university's impact via spending is improving. There's also an opportunity to, through a thoughtful process, evolve what is called environmentally preferred purchasing to help articulate a shared vision, building on a lot of the success that's honestly taking place in the health system around sustainable procurement, and finding ways to implement that, track that, and be transparent, focusing again on the high dollar opportunities. And then as another metric, action is to use the ASHE STARS rating system, a sustainability rating system for universities, to provide an interim update. Are we doing better in these categories in the near term? UW achieved its latest STARS certification this year in 2025, and so when it comes to another cycle by 2028, we want to see progress in those metrics. Transportation and commuting is another huge category that affects everyone within the university community. It's also something that involves extensive outside partners, whether there be regional, state and local departments of transportation, regional transit authorities, and even the housing development within our communities. The vision in this case is that by 2050, we've created a community where there are real, safe, and feasible choices for commuting for all the community, and that we have a way that makes commuting by fossil fuel single occupant vehicles the choice of last resort. We also acknowledge that part of travel and commuting is business travel and air travel, something where the technological advances are not moving as quickly, but what we acknowledge is a major part of professional development for staff and faculty. Within this very complex network related to transportation commuting, the flagship action is to really focus on that bicycle and pedestrian, the lowest carbon commuting areas, the ones that there are significant opportunities for improving infrastructure within the University of Washington's control. So if you can get bike to campus, that you feel that you have safe and convenient ways across the tri-campuses to get around by bike or foot. Safety is a key part of that. We want to understand what makes people feel unsafe, whether it's proximity to vehicles, lighting issues, quality of infrastructure. That's a major part of this. And then so supporting actions in the short term will look at that bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. But we also know that the university fleet is a component of that footprint for transportation and commuting. And there's some opportunities to continue to take advantage of the new technological advancements in electric vehicles to roll out across the tri-campuses. A plan should be in place by 2028, and we're excited about the potential for long-term operating cost reductions from transitioning to electric vehicles. Air travel has been something the university has been studying for a while, and right now there's a lot of interest in the emerging sustainable aviation fuel market. You may have seen different airlines offering opt-in programs to help fund that. There's also been a lot of lessons learned about hybrid and virtual meetings. To some of us, to mixed opinions about them, but they are an important tool for mitigating travel. And so within this path, the university wants to make sure that there are thoughtful options that still support, the academic mission while mitigating that impact. As we go beyond, we want to make sure that we are hitting those metrics. An electrified vehicle fleet is an easy to assess metric. And so there is a target in here for 2035 for at least the Seattle campus to hit. There's a clear partnership with the city to the city of Seattle to confirm that we can have a safe bicycle and pedestrian avenue. There's an outside metric through the League of American Bicyclists rating, which would take the campus from gold to platinum for Seattle. And then in the long term, also focusing across the tri-campus and medicine that we can get to that fully electrified fleet by 2045. Food systems, like waste, is something that touches virtually everyone in the community. I think what we heard was that it's hard to articulate what we are doing here. There's a need for, I think that what we heard was stronger and more ambitious language that could also be inclusive and also speak to the indigenous knowledge of the regional food ecosystem of this area. There's also a lot of excitement what we heard about as on hands-on living lab work. There's when we talk about food, people can really connect that with agriculture and the opportunities in their immediate community. Much of UW's food purchasing is already relatively local compared to other things that are purchased. And so there's a lot of excitement around building on that. The flagship action in this area is to move forward with these living lab projects related around food. And this has a major opportunity, not just to advance the knowledge and action for local food, but to use these programs themselves as a inclusion process that builds that community engagement by connecting food to life at the university. We did hear that there's a lot of stuff happening in individual campuses or units, and that we need something to integrate it. So you can see that. So the supporting actions really dive into some institutional wide things. So like a strategic plan, a food summit, and then potentially becoming a signatory to a meals pledge, where you really then connect what we're learning about inclusive local food culture and connecting it to metrics and emissions reductions. And then long-term, continuing to target the emissions from that food chain and connect it with the overall reduction of carbon with a 2040. The next category is land and ecological systems. I think the vision here is crystal clear. I think what we heard from folks through this process was that we want to have campuses and campus ecosystems that have biodiversity, that reflect native plantings. Although there are questions about how does a native planting evolve to a changing climate. So climate resilience is considered an important part of that vision, that the things that people love about the campuses can be preserved, maintained, and enhanced by 2050. And then beyond what is happening on the campuses, there's also the footprint, to the sound in our communities of what happens when water and other things leave the sites. So their flagship action for 2030 is to lean on external certifications as a metric to show the success of initiatives to either mitigate biodiversity or enhance biodiversity or mitigate negative impacts on the watersheds via salmon sale. That's been explored regionally, and the increased focus is now a part of this 2030 priority actions. Now within that, to support that, there's a goal to look into to collaborate with local indigenous nations and organizations to ultimately create a plan that reflects that experience and that culturally informed way of managing lands. And then tie that to policy, that by 2027, there can be a climate adapted planting list that can be deployed across the tri-campuses. And then looking at these opportunities, because we heard so much interest in this, developing an opportunity for the community get involved, whether that's at the student, staff, or faculty level, really connecting, UW's landscape to this changing climate. And then by 2028, the goal would be to start to really tell this story more effectively, either through signage or by other ways of, still evolving technological ways to communicate. When you walk through the campus, you understand what it means for the cherry trees to blossom at a certain time based on the weather, or what it means for this planting area and how it supports the overall water management goals of the university. The last focus area is community building and engagement. The idea that sustainability is not in a silo, but that it is taking all of the actions we've discussed, and that all those actions are understood and hopefully celebrated by the community. The goal here is also not just, again, informing the community, but allowing the community to inform what the university is doing. So this process is where we begin this. And then to establish an initial priority goal, the tentative flagship action for 2030 is to focus on taking the university's existing STARS certification level and increasing it to platinum, which would position the University of Washington as a clear national leader in these areas. The goal of that is that the data and the metrics and the processes that come out of that process then become an accountability tool to the community. And that lets the university both create more opportunities for engagement as well as more transparency around sustainability. To support that and to make this more celebratory and inclusive, there's a supporting action to expand the Husky Sustainability Awards. I think one thing we've learned through this process is there are people at the university and across the health system who are doing all of these things every day, and there's an amazing opportunity to tell these stories. I think the stories that are going to be documented through this planning process are a great foundation for that. And then to facilitate individual or collaborative action, a goal of creating a sustainability action plan project hub. So the idea that you would be able to go out, and if you're in your first year at a University of Washington campus, you could understand, hey, at my campus, these are the things that remain to be done around sustainability, where I can get involved in. And so finding those connections between faculty, staff, and students in a way that encourages people to get involved is a major priority by 2030. So that was a lot of information. It was a lot of tiny text. I did warn you, and you are going to have through web apps the ability to get in there, give more detailed comments, and then continue to engage with this overall process. So as mentioned before, it is June now. This is our community update. We're gearing up for more working sessions, and then we're going to continue to engage with the community going forward. And we're very excited about using this community input form as a way to gather more feedback as we work through the rest of the summer and into the fall. Again, you can always reach out to sustainabilityplan@uw.edu. And then there is a great website for the plan as well that catches you up on all these actions that we've been taking so far. I'll pause there, and Laura and Lisa, is there anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah, thanks, Ante. I think we'll also have some time for additional questions, but I just want to really thank you all for taking the time today to listen in, be engaged in this process. Yeah, feel free to use that community input form. Damon just put it in the chat as well. That form has a link to a PDF of all the visions and actions that Ante went over today, so you can use that and provide comments on specific sections or just general feedback. So really welcome you to direct your comments and feedback in a more expanded way via that mechanism. And yeah, we're open to conversations, questions via our sustainability plan at uw.edu email. And many of you have my direct contact, so you're also welcome to reach out that way. But we're more than happy to answer any questions you have about today's meeting or the draft snapshot of our plan we shared today. I just want to really iterate that no one office or team or individual can do this work alone, and that this plan belongs to all of us, every student, campus, department, and your participation in the plan is really critical to its success. So whether that's part of being part of our planning process, providing input via our forms or via email, helping to directly implement the plan, uh, we just acknowledge that your participation is really helping to inform and build and craft our plan. So we're really excited to continue building this roadmap together, and just know that your participation here today is really critical to the end goal of where we want to be in 2050. Um, so that's what I want to share. Lisa or others, did you have anything? If not, we can open it up for a few questions before we adjourn.
No, yeah, I'd love to hear from folks if you have questions, comments, concerns. Now's the time.
Yeah, feel free to use the raise hand feature or type in the chat if you have questions. Gabriel, go ahead. And you might be on mute. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay, awesome. First of all, I was really enjoying to see like all of the interim updates. I thought, or like goals, I guess. I thought that was really helpful. So that was awesome to see. One question I have was about like the zero waste. So where that industry definition is 90%, like, and so we'd be trying to get to net zero waste reduction. Does that mean like we're doing some type of offset for the last 10% that like inevitably is going to be a lot harder? Or yeah, I was just kind of curious about if we'd actually, when we get there, if we brand ourselves as being like net zero waste, and if that would be confusing for the community if we're still throwing 10% of things away. I was just, yeah, curious about that. Thanks.
You want to take a stab at that, Ante?
Yeah, I think you're correct. It is anytime you say zero and then it's not zero, it is a little confusing. That zero waste definition, it was created today. I mean, it is a term of art for today. And right, we still have materials that often are hazardous or cannot be, effectively recycled. So as a realistic term today, that's where this 90% metric has emerged. I do it, and then you are correct. Long term, when we're talking about the emissions aspect of waste, there is some kind of either offset or counteracting carbon sink that would have to mitigate the emissions impact. So I think we expect that to evolve over the next through 2050. But you're right, we want to be transparent that today when we say zero for waste, it's not a true zero, but it's acknowledging that tough 10% is still out there.
Yeah, the only other piece I'll add to that is we've had a lot of discussions and this work is still in front of us when we set that, create that zero waste target and really figure out what that true metric is. We need to also look at what components of our waste stream are excluded. Ante touched on this, but if we think about the healthcare system and so much of the single-use waste that comes out of the healthcare system, or human tissue, things that just cannot be recycled, either because of the biohazard worry, or if we think about some of the medical equipment or even research equipment that just there is not a mechanism or a taker for that stuff, that would be probably excluded from that initial what's our starting point. So it gets into the weeds really quickly, but I think we're excited to dive into that and try to start answering some of those questions that you brought up, Gabriel.
Yeah, and it looks like Amanda from UW Recycling put their email if you have any other questions about zero waste. And yeah, Liz and Amanda are definitely our experts on zero waste. And actually, UW Recycling recently hired a zero waste coordinator, which is very exciting. So thanks for that question, Gabriel. And it's one that, yeah, it's complex. So appreciate that. All right, another question in the chat. Are UW sustainability plans, actions, tours part of new student orientation programs? Good question. Um, Damon, I might tag you for answering this question as you've been a part of a lot of that integration into new student orientation and engagement.
Yeah, so I'm the communication manager for UW Sustainability. We do have information on sustainability as part of the virtual orientation or the online modules that every new student gets coming into the university. In terms of tours, events, other things, obviously we every year have things that we set up during dog days to reach students. We work with um, other students, other student groups around that. It's hard to do at scale in terms of it's hard to do a tour for every student coming in when we're talking about thousands of students on campus. But we are always kind of looking at different ways to reach students, partnering with other groups, and yeah, as Liz pointed out, the advising and orientation modules, recycling has information on that, UW Sustainability has information on that. So we're trying to reach students in different ways. And we don't have specific plans to kind of try to expand those events or tours for all students, but we definitely are trying to do as much as we can with the resources available and think of different ways to reach students in different ways.
Thanks, Steve. Good questions. Any other comments, questions? Same question for new employee orientation. Yes, we definitely have similar but targeted and tailored information given during orientation to new staff. Damon, I want to also thank you again.
Yeah, so we, again, have a slide and information provided in the new employee orientations. Our office has also been tabling at the tower for the in-person sort of orientations provided to new employees to offer information around sustainability and answer questions. And the other question there for class on waste reduction and recycling, as Liz from UW Recycling pointed out, we have training available to all staff. It's not a required training, but it is available through that training program. So, we are working. We have some of these things in place, and we're always working to expand and think of different ways to reach staff and students and engage them around sustainability.
This is Molly Groh. I was curious related to that topic on sustainability around waste reduction and diversion. I know Juan and Gabriella are on from UW Medicine around that topic. It remains a bit of an elephant in the room for UW Medicine with the fact that we really are not getting to recycle things that are put in recycling bins because of the probation status and I'm just curious if there are, if in this plan is embedded a process of tackling that more, and are there interim steps that are happening with the current planning to help support that, including getting people trained when they're joining UW Medicine about recycling and the fact that if we don't do it right, it all goes into the waste.
Maybe I'll take a stab at that, and then I'd love for Liz or other folks from UW Recycling to chime in as well. But it's a great question, Molly, and we know that medicine has been struggling with that sorting correctly at the hospital, Montlake Hospital in particular. couple things have come up during all of these discussion sessions with our community, and new ideas to try. So one is we're seeing a lot more technology come out with AI smart sorters. We are seeing that at SeaTac Airport, where it's actually this very very quick scan of the material, and it tells people, or actually sorts it for you into the correct bin. And that's something that we'd like to pilot and try, because we've been doing this for a while and we're still seeing so much contamination that let's see if we can try something new. The second idea that has come up, and this is really, I think, a great idea, something that's worked at other universities, is training the trainer. So having students be trained by UW Recycling, providing some in-person training. So these would be like waste and recycling ambassadors. And it seems like we almost need those in-person trainings in order to force people to show up and make time and space to be present and think about it and really absorb the training in a different way. So that's something that's being discussed. It does obviously take time and resources to do that and get students involved, but we're hopeful that we could try that as well. And I'd love for folks from recycling to add anything I might have missed.
I'll add that Harborview has done an amazing job doing outreach on recycling and waste. We do have a very quick training video for folks in UW Medicine on how to recycle right, just based on the problem items, but there isn't a specific course available, but we'd certainly love to partner with medicine and make one and figure out what tools that would reach folks.
I'll jump in as well. This is Gabriella from Harborview. We are working with a couple of Program of the Environment students this summer to continue the recycling remediation work at Harborview. So we're working with them to do an audit at our recycling compactor and then identify some more intervention strategies. And I think UW Medicine as a whole, we're kind of trying to see what sticks at Harborview, what's working, and then take it from there to see if we can implement those at Montlake too. But it's a challenge. We deal with gloves and masks in the recycling bins, which our vendor won't accept, and they consider it to be higher hazardous contamination than other contaminants. But just wanted to share that we're working on it, and I was happy to see that this is addressed in the Sustainability Action Plan as well.
Thanks. Thank you all. I also just want to add a observation throughout our community engagement and visioning and working group sessions is that there's so much interconnectedness throughout all our topic areas, and it's essential to identify and understand those linkages so we're not siloing our solutions. And what I understand is tied to waste is procurement and purchasing, and so we're also really thinking deeply about how can we adjust or update our purchasing methods to upstream to best reduce waste as well. So waste is definitely on our minds when we're thinking about our procurement actions and vision. So wanted to add that. Any other thoughts or questions? We have about 2 minutes left, so maybe have room for one or two more.
I had one other quick question about the goal for emissions reduction. So for like scope 1 and 2, I saw 2040 on there, which woo, that's awesome. That's exciting to see that like in writing. Is that like for 95%, or would that be like 100% of scope 1 and 2? Do you guys know?
I think the intention is for it to be 95%, consistent with what we are, thinking about the Seattle campus power plant in particular, and knowing that we probably won't be able to get to 100% just because we really need that reliability and redundancy with particularly for the hospital. the hospital is connected to the central power plant. So I think that is the thinking right now. Again, a lot of the diving into the metrics behind some of these targets and actions that you see today is the work ahead of us, but we wanted to make sure we're communicating where we're at thus far, and does it seem like we're on the right path, and do these all make sense to you as the things that we should focus on as a community. And then this fall, we plan to get into the weeds on the metrics, but it's a great question. Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've reached the end of our presentation and question time. So Alexi, thank you for putting in your link to the divestment for 401k options. That's fantastic. Let's see. Good questions. We're going to document everything in the chat as well. So we'll be sure to follow up via email with everyone who registered today with links to our presentation, as well as that community input form to provide the opportunity for you to provide more feedback and comments. But again, thank you so much for attending today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to engaging with you all over the next 6 to 8 months of progressing through this planning process. So thank you.